Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video today, and today we're going to be talking about the Houston Rockets should hire Nick Nurse, former Toronto Raptors head coach, as their next head coach, as the Rockets are very interested in bringing in Toronto Raptors former head coach, who was just fired by the Raptors today, and that is one of their top candidates, as it was reported, after the firing of Nick Nurse today, this morning. It was announced the Rockets, Nick Nurse is on the Rockets' radar and is one of their top candidates. And in the next, days to week, or even, days to week, the Rockets are going to be interviewing Nick Nurse as well. So there you go. That was one of the guys to be expected. But, before the season was over, they were talking about this already, about how the Rockets, Nick Nurse was going to be one of the favorites to, potentially be brought in. Nick Nurse was fired by the Raptors today after 5 seasons, and 5 of those seasons, they made it to the playoffs, or if not the playoff. Well, so three of the 5 seasons made it to the playoffs. One of the other years they were in the play-in. Only 1 year with the Raptors, in his 5 years, did they miss not either the playoff or the play-in. So first year as the head coach, they won the NBA championship with that stacked Raptors team in 18-19 with Kawhi, Pascal, Kyle Lowry. That was just a really unbelievable team in 18-19. Then they lose their star player with Kawhi Leonard going into the next year, and they're still a good team with Lowry and Siakam and some of their other players. Some guys step up, and they lose to Boston in the bubble in 7 games, which was a little tough, but the bubble was a weird time, but made it to the second round. That whatever. Next season was one of his worst seasons as the head coach, when they were one of the worst teams in basketball, like they were like the 5th or 6th worst team in basketball. Landed the 4th overall pick though, or no, not the 4th. Was that the 4th? They landed either the 4th or 5th overall pick, where they selected, I think it was the 5th, where they selected Scotty Barnes in the first round, and he had an amazing rookie year. The Raptors bounced back, made it into the 5th seed in the playoffs, and lost to the Philadelphia 76ers in 6 games in last year's playoffs. And this year, it was an up-and-down year for them, where they finished, 41-41 or something, or 40-42, and they had their moments where they did some good stuff, but then they were just up and down, and there was talks about tanking, and there was just a lot of talks with the Raptors this season, and not that great of a year. And I will say Nick Nurse is a good coach, and I think the Raptors have some good talent, but it's just, I don't know. They weren't that great of a team this year, and they were able to make it into the play-in as the 9 seed, where they hosted the Chicago Bulls in for the play-in game a couple weeks ago, and played a great first half, even the great third quarter, most of the whole third quarter actually, and played a great game, and we're up at least 17-18 in that game, and Raptors blew it in the 4th quarter, and Bulls came back. Raptors season was over after that. So that and a couple other reasons are one of the biggest reasons that Nick Nurse is no longer the coach for the Raptors. But I do think in his short time, his 5 years, I think he had a successful stint with the Toronto Raptors, that if he doesn't get a job this year, I think it's for sure he'll get a job next year. Because right now, I think the only team that should really be interested in him is the Rockets. I think the other jobs, the Pistons, I don't see the Pistons thinking about really bringing him in. I think the Pistons are looking at some more on the assistant side right now. I know they like Charles Lee a lot from Milwaukee. And there's not a lot of coach openings this year. Not a lot at all. And maybe that changes after the first round. Maybe you'll see some coaches part ways as the playoffs go deeper. Maybe, possibly, I don't know. But this is not a big year for coaches getting fired or parting ways with each other. You've seen Dwayne Casey step down. You saw Silas and Nurse being fired. But besides that, I don't think you're going to see much else. But I'm going to be talking about why I think Nick Nurse is a good fit for the Rockets. I like it because number one, he's a good defensive coach. He's a good defensive head coach, and the Rockets right now, their defense is rising. They have a good defense. Jabari's a good defensive player. Tari Easton's a great defensive player. If you keep Jayshawn Tate, he's a defensive monster. Alp, I hope he improves his defense. We've seen it get better at times, and I think eventually he can get it even better than it is right now. KPJ's pretty solid at defense. Jalen's not that great, but I think that can be worked on as well. So the defense of the Rockets, it's okay. It's and I think with Nick Nurse added in, the defense would improve, and he'd make that our defense and the way that our defense is played even better than it already is. And I like the way the defense. I don't know. I'm not saying I like the way Silas run the defense, but I liked the way. I like the way that the Rockets played defense last year. It was solid, but I think they need some minor changes, and I can't really get to those minor changes, and that's probably something they can get those details, but yeah, and I think one of those things and details might be having a coach that is very defensive minded, and Silas was not really defensive minded head coach, and I think Nurse is a guy he's gonna definitely do that with the Rockets. And Silas was also, at the same time, he wasn't really a team guy. He was more of a players coach. Nurse is a guy who will focus on the whole team as well for the Rockets. I'm not saying any the other candidates that the Rockets have for the head coach like Udoka or Frank Vogel or some of these other guys that the Rockets are interviewing are not, team coaches. Like, because Silas was a player's coach. He was not, but I think Nurse, he's focused on every player at the same time. He'll focus on the whole team's needs. Silas always focused on the players, on players, different things. Never focused on what the team needed, just in my opinion. And he was just more of a player's coach. And I don't think that is something Nurse is. And I think Nurse will be able to focus on everything for the team and what the team needs. And that's just my opinion, though. And I think Udoka would be doing the same thing for the Rockets as well if he comes in potentially as the other guy that the Rockets are really interested from Boston. But those are my couple of reasons why I think the Rockets, could really, use Nick Nurse's, help and his addition as the head coach. And we'll see what happens. I think right now he's the best option because as of right now, if interviews go well for Udoka, I think Udoka might be going to Toronto, and maybe Udoka does he want to go to Toronto though? Because it's looking like Toronto might be heading into a rebuild. I'm not sure, though, and that's probably something he's going to want to figure out in his interview is like, all right, what's the direction of this team? Because the Rockets, if the Raptors are going into a rebuild, you'd rather go to the Rockets, right? If you're Udoka, because if they're going into rebuild, it's going to take way longer because the Rockets are, Rafi Stone the GM is saying we feel like we're in, we're in the midpoint of the rebuild. We've passed the first stage, we're on the second, and usually there's only like 2 or 3 stages of a rebuild. So, we're getting out of it, that's what Stone believes, and I don't think he's a person that would lie about that, but so if the Raptors are going to rebuild, then maybe he'd rather come to Houston. But I think if the Raptors have some interest in Udoka, maybe there's a chance they do not plan on breaking everybody up. And yes, they might trade Anunoby or Siakam, or more, and then let Trent and Van Vliet walk. But they still have Scotty Barnes, and they would still get some decent assets for Siakam and Barnes. Not saying they'd be a good team with Barnes and the assets they get for Anunoby and Siakam, but I mean that's a decent squad. But I mean we'll have to see what happens. You guys have your thoughts on the Rockets potentially hiring Nick Nurse as their head coach, and that's it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace out. Go Rockets.